Good morning, sunshines. You survived it. The last lecture. Yay! All right, today we're going to talk about Angels in America a little bit. For those of you who are assigned Angels in America as your presentation for the class, put together your materials and email them to me, and I'll disseminate them to the rest of the class, as we have been all semester. Angels in America is a very complex masterpiece, is what I'm going to call it. It is about many different things. It's about religion, especially Judaism and Mormonism. It is about homosexuality. It's about disease, AIDS specifically, also mental illness, and how to deal with people who are in both of those conditions. It is frank. It is gruesome. It is hysterical at times. There are ghosts that appear from people's pasts. There are angels that appear from nowhere. It is very surreal at times, and it's a lot of fun. One of the things that I've done, I've included for the next class period, again, this is the last lecture, but we have one more class meeting where we're going to, I'm sending you the links to Acts 1, Acts 2, and Acts 3 of Angels in America. And for the next class period, I need you to watch those 3 links because, again, the play can be very dense on the page. So, again, it gives you a little help in understanding the play specifically. Again, one of the things about Tony Kushner, who's a playwright, he's born in 1956. I would say of the next generation of playwrights, he's the one I'm most sure is going to have a firm place in the American psyche. He's written 35 plays to date. He won a Pulitzer Prize for Angels in America. He's also written a musical that he won a Tony Award for called Caroline or Change. Now again, he just wrote the book to the musical, he didn't write the music. He's also written 5 movies. 2 of them have been nominated for an Oscar. Both of them were with Steven Spielberg, Munich, and also Lincoln. And Lincoln, the screenplay for Lincoln won him an Oscar for best writer, for best screenplay that year. So Tony Kushner has certainly made a name for himself in the industry. To help us understand some of the issues that are in Angels in America, I'm going to show you a scene. One of the things that Angels in America, it has many characters. One of the great things about it is the characters are all complete. They all have a background. They all have different approaches to the world. They're very interesting characters. They're certainly not bland and passé. They certainly have issues and attitudes. But one of the characters in the play is based on an actual, real, living person. His name is Roy Cohn. We've talked about the House on Un-American Activities Committee several times in this class before. Roy Cohn was one of the lawyers who worked with McCarthy in order to out the communists. And there was this female that he accused of spying, and he made sure that she received the electric chair. And one of the ghosts in the play that haunts one of the characters in the play is this ghost coming back to haunt Roy Cohn. Now, a little bit about Roy Cohn. He was a fiendish lawyer, very Republican, very right-wing politician. Again, he was in the Reagan White House during the time this play was released in '89, but it was about the lack of activity that the government had in pursuing the AIDS crisis because it was seen as a gay disease. And so when it first happened in the mid-'80s, the only people who contracted AIDS were homosexuals and Haitians for some reason. And so it was viewed as a disease that it was God's wrath to man. And so there were several years that passed where nothing was done to combat the disease, and it spread throughout America, and especially in Africa, unabated. And one of the people who pursued this policy was a man named Roy Cohn, who outwardly was heterosexual, but truth be known, he was homosexual and eventually died from the disease in the late 80s. So again, it's about the hypocrisy that you're going to find in government and all that sort of thing. Anyway, I'm going to show you a scene where his doctor is trying to explain to Roy Cohn that he has AIDS, And the nice thing about it is it also describes a little bit about what AIDS actually is. So enjoy this little scene.
Nobody knows what causes it. And nobody knows how to cure it. The best theory is that we blame a retrovirus, the human immunodeficiency virus. Its presence is made known to us by the useless antibodies which appear in reaction to its entrance into the bloodstream through a cut or an orifice. The antibodies are powerless to protect the body against it. Why? We don't know. The body's immune system ceases to function. Sometimes the body even attacks itself. At any rate, it's left open to a whole horror house of infections from microbes which it usually defends against. Like Kaposi's sarcomas, these lesions, or your throat problem, or the glands. We think it may also be able to slip past the blood-brain barrier into the brain, which is, of course, very bad news. And it's fatal in we don't know what % of people with suppressed immune responses.
This is very interesting, Mr. Wizard, but why the fuck are you telling me this?
Well, I have just removed one of 3 lesions, which biopsy results will probably tell us is a Kaposi's sarcoma lesion. And you have a pronounced swelling of glands in your neck, groin, and armpits. Lymphadenopathy is another sign. And you have oral candidiasis. And maybe a little more fungus under the fingernails of 2 digits on your right hand. So that's why...
This disease.
Syndrome.
Whatever. It afflicts mostly homosexuals and drug addicts.
Mostly. Hemophiliacs are also at risk.
Homosexuals and drug addicts. So why are you implying that I... What are you implying, Henry? I'm not a drug addict.
Oh, come on, Roy.
What? Come on, Roy, what? Do you think I'm a junkie, Henry? Do you see tracks?
This is absurd.
Say it.
Say what?
Say Roy Cohn, URA.
Roy, I don't...
URA, go on. Not Roy Cohn. You are a drug fiend. Roy Marcus Cohn. URA. Go on, Henry. It starts with an H.
I'm not
with
gonna...
an H, Henry, and it isn't hemophiliac. Come on.
What are you doing, Roy?
No, say it. I mean it. Say, Roy Cohn, you are a homosexual. And I will proceed systematically to destroy your reputation and your practice and your career in New York State, Henry. Which you know I can do.
Roy, you have been seeing me since 1958. Apart from the facelifts, I've treated you for everything, from syphilis...
From a whore in Dallas.
From syphilis to venereal warts in your rectum. Which you may have gotten from a whore in Dallas, but it wasn't a female whore.
So say it.
Roy Cohn, you are... You have had sex with men many, many times, Roy. And one of them, or any number of them, has made you very sick. You have AIDS.
Your problem, Henry, is that you are hung up on words, on labels, that you believe they mean what they seem to mean. AIDS, homosexual, gay, lesbian. You think these are names that tell you who someone sleeps with. But they don't tell you that.
No?
No. Like all labels, they tell you one thing, and one thing only. Where does an individual so identified fit in the food chain, in the pecking order? Not ideology or sexual taste, but something much simpler. Clout. Not who I fuck or who fucks me, but who will pick up the phone when I call. Who owes me favors. This is what a label refers to. Now, to someone who does not understand this, homosexual is what I am because I have sex with men. But really, this is wrong. Homosexuals are not men who sleep with other men. Homosexuals are men who, in 15 years of trying, cannot pass a pissant anti-discrimination bill through city council. Homosexuals are men who know nobody and who nobody knows, who have zero clout. Does this sound like me, Henry?
No.
No, I have clout. A lot. I can pick up this phone, punch 15 numbers, and you know who will be on the other end in under 5 minutes, Henry?
The president.
Even better, Henry. His wife.
Oh, I'm impressed.
I don't want you to be impressed. I want you to understand. This is not sophistry, and this is not hypocrisy. This is reality. I have sex with men, but unlike nearly every other man of whom this is true, I bring the guy I'm screwing to the White House, and President Reagan smiles at us and shakes his hand, because what I am is defined entirely by who I am. Roy Cohn is not a homosexual. Roy Cohn is a heterosexual man, Henry, who fucks around with guys.
Okay, Roy.
And what is my diagnosis, Henry?
You have AIDS, Roy.
No, Henry, no. AIDS is what homosexuals have. I have liver cancer.
Well, whatever the fuck you have, Roy, it's very serious, and I haven't got a damn thing for you. The NIH in Bethesda has a new drug called AZT with a 2-year waiting list that not even I can get you onto. So get on the phone, Roy, and dial the 15 numbers. And tell the First Lady that you need in on an experimental treatment for liver cancer. Because you can call it any damn thing you want, Roy. But what it boils down to is very bad news.
Again, very frank, very open, very straightforward, not necessarily something you've ever seen on stage before. Again, you're going to see all the elements of theater coming together in Angels in America. And again, I hope you will leave it for the rest of you to watch the entire show for next class period. And again, if you have any questions or problems or concerns, please, by all means, feel free to email me and let me know. One of the other great innovations in American theater in the 20th century was the audience-to-actor relationship. Not only were playwrights encouraged to pursue different ways of presenting the play, directors having different tools at their command, expressionism, impressionism, all those sort of things, it's realism, but the playwrights started playing with the audience-to-actor configuration. Going back as far as the 17th century, from the time of the French really, the proscenium stage was the dominant style. Most theaters today are still going to be proscenium. Proscenium stage, the proscenium arch, is the architectural division between the audience and the actor. In other words, it's the picture frame. And you can see that there's a stage beyond, and the audience is on this side and the actors are on that side, and never do they cross. There's a safety zone there, a free zone, Often talked about as the fourth wall in straight comedy, straight plays where there's just a 3-wall set on stage, and you just sort of take away the fourth wall, and the audience is sort of looking in on the environment that way. But that is the standard up until the 20th century. One of the things that happens in the 20th century is that playwrights as well as directors start expanding and changing and altering the way the audience sees the play. One of the major innovations was a thrust stage. Now, I say innovation, but really that's the way the Greeks did it. A thrust stage is a stage that goes out into the audience. There's a little picture there where you can see that the stage, you can see that 2/3 of the audience sees the other audience as their scenery, as their background. There's still room for scenery behind. You see that little purple curtain back there. There's still room to put scenery back there, but scenery has become far less important, and the focus has become much more on the actor, to eventually evolve into theater in the round arena theater, where there is no wall at all. The set has disappeared almost totally, and you see there's a space for the actor to be in the center, and audience is surrounded on all sides. And it's difficult to put doors, windows, and things up, because if you put a door or window up, you're going to block some audience's view. So things become very impressionistic. Reality has now gone out the window as far as scene design is concerned, and now you're into a new innovative style of theater. The fourth style, I'm just going to call it a multi-form space. Our theater is a black box, for instance. We can do proscenium, we do often. We can also do thrust, and we can do it in the round. True multi-form space, though, is something that's much more adventurous. The style I've shown here is stadium seating, where you have audiences on two sides. You could also have theater stuck in the corner. You could have theater, have the audience in the middle and theater happening around people. That's a black box theater. You can be changed. It's a multi-form space. But again, those type of theaters start becoming the more common type of theater to be built because stage productions rely less and less on the scenery to tell the story, and more on the actor to explain the story and what's going on. This is a flow chart of a theater showing all the positions and the things and the people that work behind the scenes to make the actors look good on stage. Now, of course, as an audience, all you see are the actors and maybe the dancers and a couple of singers and that sort of stuff on stage. But the rest of these positions all exist and are there to help assist and coordinate the productions. Now, this is a flowchart for a theater called the Stone Theater. It's an equity theater, and so it's got a lot more specifically designed positions than a lot of smaller theaters may have. The jobs still exist, but some of the people may do more than one thing, especially in smaller community theater type situations. But we're going to go through quickly and sort of talk about what each person in this flowchart does. First, we're going to start at the top. Again, Cherry Chiaro is the managing director of the Stone Theater, but they're generally at the theater as a person in charge. The Alabama Shakespeare Festival, for instance, has two people in charge. There's the director, the artistic director, Rick Dildine, who's in charge of the design or the productions of the shows, and then there's a managing director who's in charge of the business and the organizational part of the theater. Many theaters, especially in America, are run by a board of directors because a lot of theaters in America are what are called not-for-profit organizations. And as a not-for-profit organization, you don't have to pay taxes, which is a nice thing, but you have to prove that you're not trying to make money doing the thing you're doing. As schools, for instance, Auburn University Montgomery is a not-for-profit organization. There are certainly some for-profit theaters. Broadway is a for-profit organization. But the New York Shakespeare Festival, for instance, though, is not a for-profit organization. Now, they also produced, for instance, Hamilton originally. So at some point, a lot of times, theaters that produce shows for not-for-profit, once the show starts making a profit, will find a way to make profits off of it. So occasionally that happens, but there may be a board of directors who will hire the producer, but for the most part, the producer is an autonomous person who's responsible for running the theater. Yes, the money person. Yes. Now the producer will hire a director. The director is the person responsible for interpreting the play, as we talked about many times, taking the play from the stage, from the page to the stage. Yes. Occasionally there will be a person, and you see on the right there, called a playwright. Especially with new works, you'll have the playwright involved. But for the most part, most productions in the 21st century are remounts of shows that have been done previously. Especially if we're doing something like Shakespeare, the playwright's been dead for 400 years, and so the world is your oyster. You can do whatever you like to the play. But if you're doing a modern work, a lot of times the playwright is there, and you have to deal with what the playwright, the opinions and ideas about from the playwright. Sometimes the directors will have assistants. You'll see different directors work with different assistants in different ways. Sometimes, for instance, if you have a ballet sequence or a dance sequence, you'll have a choreographer, you'll have musical directors, you'll have fight directors, you'll have people who have special skills that will assist the director in production. At the Stone Theater, there's this position called the production manager. The production manager is sort of the coordinator for the entire theater, in the sense that they make sure the contracts have been signed, that people's the logistics of things have been done. People fly in, fly out, all that sort of stuff. Usually, though, in smaller community theaters like the Wetumpka Depot, the Cloverdale Playhouse, you just work with people within the community, and so the production manager position really doesn't exist on smaller scale theaters. Occasionally you might bring somebody in, but the producer would probably deal with that more than anybody else. And in the production manager's place, there's a person called the technical director, who's a little bit further down the chain, that usually will fill the position of the production stage manager in most smaller theaters. And so usually one of the things about a technical director, specifically they're charged with building the set. But a lot of times they are the highest ranking staff member in most theaters, and so they'll be given a lot of command of budgets, both the number of people, of time, of money, that sort of thing. And so the technical director's position and the production manager's positions are sort of synonymous. Again, in the theater, like the Stone Theater, where you have a large number of paid positions, the production manager is a full-time job, and the technical director focuses just on building the scenery. But in a lot of smaller theaters, those positions would be combined. You can also see this person, the production stage manager, usually just called a stage manager. The stage manager is the person who is responsible for calling the show every night, for making sure that the cues happen when the lighting designer and the sound designer and the scene designer have said that the shifts happen, the director has commanded them. They're the people that make sure that the actors are on call or on time. They're the people that make sure the show has been done the way the director intended the show to be done. And anytime there's things that happen, occasionally, for instance, you'll have props that get broken. Occasionally you'll have costumes that rip. The stage manager makes sure, through a series of notes back and forth with the position heads, that people fix the ripped costumes or repair the broken mugs or whatever it is that has happened during the course of the show. So the stage manager has no role in interpreting the play, but the stage manager is the person who's responsible for making sure the show happens on the time and pace and scale that is supposed to happen as figured out by the director and the other people like the choreographer, etc. Over there, we're going to start to the left from the producer. You see there's a whole administrative wing, business managers, office managers. You got to sell tickets. You got to promote the show. You got house managers who are responsible for making sure the auditorium is clear. You got ushers that work under house managers. You got people in marketing. You got people in the box office that are selling tickets, taking in the money. That's the whole business wing of the theater, and there certainly are people that work in those areas, but they have little, if anything, to do with the artistic side of the productions, and so we focus mostly on the artistic side of the show. So during performance, you have people that are called the fight captain, the dance captain. You have people who are in charge of maintaining the show at the quality that the way the show is intended to be done. Those actually come from the company of actors. They're singled out. They get paid extra to do those type of things. And generally, you'll have, for instance, if you have understudies for the roles, an understudy is an actor who is replacing an actor if in case they're sick, so they've already learned the role a little bit. And occasionally, every so often, you'll have understudy rehearsals just to keep because the main performer is doing the show every night. A lot of times the understudies get lose track of what they're supposed to be doing, changes that may have happened, that sort of thing. And so occasionally we have an understudy rehearsal where the understudy will come in and rehearse that evening. The stage manager again coordinates those things, but the fight manager, fight director will come in. They often have fight calls before the show, that sort of thing. So there's the company of actors and the people that take care of those and are in production every night. You also have the set crew, the light board operators, the sound operators, so you have the crew that runs the show. And those are the people that are there every single night doing the show. Oftentimes people get sick, and so you have to have replacements for those people. So having the stage managers will often have a list of the duties of the people in the show. For instance, let's say you're a wardrobe person and you do the quick changes off stage. If you make a list of all the quick changes a certain position holds or does, that way if they're sick and you have to have a replacement, you can give the replacement the list of things that the wardrobe person does, and that way they may not know exactly what to do, but they'll know to go to bin 5 and pull the pink dress and stand there until somebody takes it and help them change into the costume, that sort of thing. The actors know the show, but a lot of times the people will be sick and you'll have to have replacement board offs, that sort of thing. So again, you have to prepare for the worst as a stage manager, so you have what's called your Bible, your script, that you run the show from. Now, as far as the design of the show, going back to before production, you have your production team, and again, this is your design and technical wing to the right there. You have this layer of designers, the scene designers responsible for the actual physical stage design, what's there. The lighting designer is responsible for what the light cues look like, any change in lighting, getting brighter, darker, turning colors, that sort of thing. The sound designer is responsible for any kind of oral treatment. You have live sound, you have recorded sounds, you have music, you have thunder, lightning, that sort of stuff. Well, obviously not lightning. Costume designers, again, responsible for what the actors are wearing. Props designer is usually anything that's a prop is something that the actor holds in their hand. So for instance, right now, these pair of glasses are props. Things that are just there that you may not, that are just set decoration. For instance, right now, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little, this podium, for instance. It's just set decoration. It's just there until I refer to it. This piece of paper is set decoration. It's just there unless the actor needs it. Then it becomes a prop. Okay. Once the actor uses the piece of paper or the glasses, it becomes a prop in the show. And again, you have to make sure that it works and that the actor has it for the right calls and cues and that sort of thing. But that's what the prop designer does. And then each of those people has their own crew. The light designer has a light crew. You have a master electrician. Again, the technical director works with the scene designer. You have a scene crew that paints and builds, and you sometimes have a welding crew, so depending on how the set needs to be built. A lot of times you'll have, in the costumes positions, you'll have wardrobe people, but you also have people who do the laundry and make sure that things are washed and dried. You have wig people, that sort of thing, that work with those people. So again, each of these little blocks toward the bottom can represent a good 10, 15 people sometimes. But you can see, if you look at the whole flow chart, that if you look just at the actors, it is a very small part of what a theater community is like. And you really do have a whole lot of people that are making the life of the actors easier and making the production happen. Yes? Cool. All right. We're going to end with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 people here who I think are the next coming wave. Again, as I was telling Cody on the way down, these people change more often than not in the presentation of this class, simply because one person will come and win a Pulitzer until they take control, all that sort of stuff. A couple of these people have been around for a few years. Again, I've still got nobody that was born after 1980, so again, there's some young playwrights out there that I just don't have time in this class to go through everybody. So I picked these 6 people as the next generation of people. The first, she certainly she won a Pulitzer Prize for a play called How I Learned to Drive. Not that any of you need any extra credit, but the last play that is in your text is How I Learned to Drive, and you could read it for extra credit and write me a little report on it. One of the things about Paula Vogel, she was born in 1951, still alive today, her plays tend to deal with hypersexual situations. The characters in her plays almost always have some sort of sexual problem. She herself was a lesbian, and she was the first outed lesbian to win a Pulitzer Prize with How I Learned to Drive. In the play, there are several people who have nicknames. For instance, Little Bit is called Little Bit because when she was little, her breasts were little bitty sprouts. And so the characters have nicknames based upon their sexual energy, I guess is the best way to put it. There's a father who is very sexually active. There's incest between an uncle and a daughter. It's not a fraternity, it's an uncle who married into the family. I don't know if that makes it any better, but incest is discussed. And that's what happens in a lot of Paula Vogel plays. She borders on the pornographic. She certainly questions and pushes the line of the pornographic in her plays, which for the little lady is funny because here she is, this 65-year-old lady who's writing these type of plays. Paula Vogel did teach at Brown. She is retired from teaching now. But while she was teaching, one of her students, a man named Nilo Cruz, who is from Cuba, and Nilo Cruz happened to win a Pulitzer Prize as well for a play called Anna in the Tropics. I'll show you a little brief video on Anna in the Tropics.
I just arrived from the island.
What are you planning on reading to us?
First, Tolstoy, Anna Karenina.
Anna Karenina! I like the title already. Is it romantic?
Yes, quite romantic.
Ah, yes. We can't forget our lector, who brought us the world of Anna Karenina.
Again, that was sort of a promotional campaign. Anna in the Tropics is really about this cigar shop where the employers are mistreating the employees, and there's eventually the employees rise up and try and start a union and all this sort of stuff, get better conditions. One of the things that happens, they bring in somebody to read a book to them instead of having just the mind-numbing stuff and just making the cigars for the shop. You have somebody come in and actually read Anna Karenina to them and read literature to them. So there are a lot of phases during the course of the play, but basically it's a very political play about work and the value of work and the responsibility that the owner has to the employees and vice versa. But they become the only pair of student and teacher to both have ever won a Pulitzer Prize. So I think that's a kind of an interesting thing. For years, I thought Susan Laurie Parks, who was born in 1964, was going to be the rage. And she started off on fire. She won a Pulitzer Prize for a play called Topdog, Underdog. Topdog, Underdog has two characters in the play. They're both black men, they're brothers. One is a light-skinned African-American, and one is a dark-skinned African-American. And again, I'm not African-American, but I have heard rumor that there is some conflict between those two aspects of African-American life. And Lincoln is a light-skinned African-American, and in his life he pretends to be Lincoln in this little sideshow thing where people shoot pop guns at him. And Booth is his brother, who is the dark-skinned African-American, who is trying to learn the three-card Monte as his tool of trade. And as you can guess by their names, at the end of the play, there is a little fight between the brothers that one brother may wind up winning. We'll let you guess based on history as to who the winner of that fight might be. In the Blood is another one of her. She was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize for In the Blood. The one that's in your text is a play called The American Play. It was actually written before either one of those plays, but in the American play you also have people pretending to be Abraham Lincoln. I don't know what it is with Suzanne Laurie Parks' fascination with Abraham Lincoln, but of course he freed the slaves. But there is a African-American playwright named Lynn, Nottage, who has sort of taken up the mantle from Suzanne Laurie Parks. Suzanne Laurie Parks sort of started resting on her laurels. Don't let her hear that from me. But she started going around speaking, giving lectures, making $30,000 to $40,000 a lecture, staying at universities for a semester and teaching, that sort of stuff, and has stopped writing plays. Hasn't produced. She only wrote up to date 19 plays. But Lynn Nottage was born in 1964 as well, the same year. She teaches at Columbia University. Lynn Nottage does. To date, she has written 11 plays and won 2 Pulitzer Prizes. The Pulitzer Prize was won for a play called Sweat. Sweat takes place in a bar in the Northeast, and there's a factory in the town, and you find out at the beginning of the play that the factory is sending some jobs to Mexico, and so you have some members of the bar who are very angry at the company because they've lost their job, but then some people defend the company, and of course at the beginning of the second act, the company is totally sending everybody down to Mexico, and so the entire village or town is going under because of the loss of the factory jobs. So that's Sweat. Her other Pulitzer Prize was for a play called Ruined. Ruined, again, happens in a bar, but it happens in a bar in Africa. And you have these ladies who run the bar, but there are these militants who come in and enslave them, basically, and take over the running of the bar. I'll show you a little video from Ruined. Just again to give you a sense of the type of plays that Lynn Nottage writes. So enjoy this little sequence.
I've been expecting you for the last 3 weeks. How am I supposed to do business? No soap, no cigarettes, no condoms?
I've done many things for you over the years, and I don't ask for a lot in return.
Does that make me a thief or merely more clever than you?
Hey, don't look so hard at a man like that.
We can do better.
You can see it's very visceral, very raw. There's a rape scene that's pretty graphic in the course of the play. One of her nicer plays is a play called Intimate Apparel, where you have this young African American in the early part of the 20th century who sews corsets and ladies' undergarments for people in society. And she is rather homely herself, according to the play, but eventually marries a man who helped build the Panama Canal, who was very gruff. But it's a interesting mixture about how a person survives in a world that is so harsh, but survives with such beauty and elegance. It's one of my favorite plays, recent plays. And I think Lynn Nottage has certainly made her claim, stated claim as being one of the major playwrights that's evolving in America. One of the strangest playwrights in the modern sense is a woman named Sarah Ruhl. Sarah Ruhl has to date written 15 plays. She was born in 1974. She's a little younger than the other ladies we've been talking about. Sarah Ruhl's plays are extremely funny. They're extremely raucous. She was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize for a play called The Clean House, where you have this woman who's a doctor who just wants everything very clean, and unfortunately for her, she's hired a housemaid who's a South American woman who hates cleaning house. I have no idea why she's got a house cleaner, but that's what she does. Anyway, the house cleaner wants to be a comedian. And so she goes around telling jokes all the time. She's trying to tell jokes. Jokes pretty bad. I would say her best play is called In the Next Room. The subtitle is The Vibrator Play. There's a doctor who is experimenting. Again, this happens in the latter half of the 19th century, and he's experimenting with women's orgasms and trying to figure out how and why and all this sort of stuff. Anyway, here's a little video of the opening night of the show. It opened in 2009. Enjoy this little sequence here.
Hello, I'm Richard Ridge for Broadway Beat. We're at the opening night celebration for the latest from Lincoln Center Theater. It's Sarah Ruhl's In the Next Room, or the Vibrator play, playing at the Lyceum Theater. It's directed by Les Waters and stars Tony Award winners Michael Cerveris and Laura Benanti.
Excuse me. What is it?
What is that sound? What are you doing?
Electrical therapy, my dear. A very successful session.
I wish to see it.
You would not understand. Leave me my dry, boring science, and I will give you the rest of the world. Besides, you said yourself, my electricity bored
I
you.
insist on seeing your machine now.
Are you going to force me to lock my laboratory?
I am your wife.
And happily, you are my blooming young wife, without a hint of neuroses and in no need of my experiments and inventions.
Experiment on me!
Oh, I can assure you, you would not like it.
Experiment on me!
It would be unseemly for a man of science to experiment on his own wife. I would lose my credibility. Now, would you please have the decency to be quiet while Mrs. Daughtry is in the next room?
I've been a fan of Sarah Ruhl's writing for some time. I did a workshop a few years ago of another play of hers called Passion Play. And I've been looking forward to having an opportunity to really settle into a production with her. So there's that at the base level. And this particular play, I felt is so beautiful and kind of the most complete fulfillment of the kind of writing she's been doing to date. You know, it's sort of got every element of what she does so beautifully. The humor and the structure and the craftsmanship, but also just, you know, her very personal, idiosyncratic and hugely generous heart and soul that I think is so apparent in the writing. And, you know, getting to play a character who goes on such a journey from being so closed off to being as open and unprotected as you can be. I mean, that's appealing journey to chart, and then to get to work with Laura and Maria and Chandler and Tom and everybody in the cast, many of whom I knew having seen them in things, and a couple of whom I had worked with before. Actually, I had never worked with anybody before, other than a workshop here or there, or Laura and I did a concert or two, did songs at a benefit together. But so that's been especially exciting.
Wait, Elizabeth, before you leave, perhaps you can settle a question? Mrs. Daughtry and I have had 2 experiences of the very same event. Have you ever had this sensation either? You feel shivers all over your body, and you feel like running, and your feet get very hot as though you're dancing on devil's coals.
Or you see unaccountable patterns of lights, of electricity under your eyelids, and your heart races, and your legs feel very weak as though you cannot walk.
And your face gets suddenly hot, like a strange sudden sunburn.
Or there are red splotches up one side of your entire body, a strange rash here.
Or the feeling of burning as though you'll get no relief, and your mouth is dry, and you lick your lips, and you find your face is making an ugly expression, so you cover your face with your hands.
And sometimes a great outpouring of liquid and the sheets are wet. Oh, but it's not an unpleasant sensation, but a little frightening. Is that a riddle?
What attracted me to the play was just its honesty, how deeply funny it was, and then how deeply moving it was. And what attracted me to the role was the challenge. She's not an easy person to play, to make into a full person. So as a person who always wants to grow and change and learn new things, I looked at it as a challenge, and it has been a challenge, but one that has been very rewarding. I've always felt very drawn to the Victorian era. I think I must have lived in a past life in the Victorian era. And I'm very, you know what it is? It's the innocence that attracts me. When things still were able to seem magical. I'm very drawn to that.
but it's a hysterical play. Again, it's I would say there are lessons that the modern audience can certainly take. Men certainly don't necessarily know all about women's bodies even today, and so it is uncomfortable at times, but it is hysterical, and that's the type of play that Sarah Ruhl writes. A very comedic playwright, as far as and far less serious in nature, but still important information to know about society and public and all that sort of stuff. One of my favorite playwrights, just because he's a friend of mine, is a man named Tracy. I've actually played poker with Tracy. He's from Chicago. He's an actor like Sam Shepard, as well as a playwright. He has been in 5 plays as an actor on Broadway. He's written 9 plays to date, and he won a Pulitzer Prize for a play called August Osage County. Tracy Letts was actually born in Oklahoma, raised in Oklahoma, and August Osage County is about this dysfunctional family from Oklahoma, and I think that there has a lot to do with sort of his personal history. Anyway, there was a movie made out of it a couple years ago. Here's the trailer for the movie, just so you get a sense of the play.
Life is very long. T.S. Eliot. Not the first person to say it. Certainly not the first person to think it. Absolutely goddamn right.
You ready for this?
No. No way.
Hey, Mom, I'm here.
Oh, Mom, you're so big. Look at your boobs. Last time I saw you, you looked like a little boy.
Damn your father for putting me through this.
Do you remember your Aunt Karen?
Well, that must be this year's man. Soon you'll be gone, never to return.
Don't start, Laura.
Your father, you broke his heart when you moved away.
That is wildly unfair.
You were Beverly's favorite, you know that.
I prefer to think my parents loved their children equally.
I'm sure you prefer to think that Santa Claus brought you presents, too.
I missed Uncle Beth's funeral.
That doesn't mean anything compared to what you have in your heart.
Bill, where are you living now?
Beg your pardon?
You and Barb are separated, right? Or are you divorced already? Is there a younger woman involved?
You've said enough on this topic.
Yes.
Well, see, odds are against you there, babe.
That's pleasant.
In my day, families stayed together.
I'm a man on fire, walking through your street with one guitar and 2 dancing feet.
You supposed to be smoking?
Is anybody supposed to smoke?
What are you doing?
Do I smell what I think I smell?
Be a father. Help me.
Our kid is trying to deal with this madhouse you've dragged her into.
This madhouse is my home.
Yeah, think about that statement for a second.
Marriage is hard.
That's one thing about Mom and Dad. You gotta tip your hat to anybody who could stay married that long.
Karen killed himself. Thank God we can't tell the future. We'd never get out of it.
Tracy is very down-to-earth playwright. His characters are very diverse. They're very witty. They're all very much searching for the truth in life. He's got one of his other plays, a play called Bug, where these people, speaking of people in quarantine, these 2 people both are scared of bugs to the point where they eventually put tinfoil all around the inside of their house so they can make sure that there are no bugs that have entered their house. Anyway, it's about the insanity, and of course the bugs wind up being the human beings. So I'm sure you've seen reports that the world is cleansing itself now that people are not polluting it nearly as much. So that's the type of plays that Tracy Letts won. And I beat him at poker, so I was always going to bring that up. Anyway, he was born in 1965. He's a great guy. So what does that bring us? Theater, obviously. One of the things about theater, it can be a shortcut to history. It can show you what people thought back in history. You can talk to live a play by Oedipus Rex, that was written 2,500 years ago, and begin to understand the way people thought and acted during that time period. It can also be, I would say, it transports you. It connects all of us. It shows how each of us can have different attitudes, different ideas about how the world works. It can be an illuminating experience. Obviously, it's a form of communication. But theater can be it is a living, breathing thing, as opposed to other forms of art where you're looking at a piece of art on the wall and thinking, oh, this is the way it was done and why it was done. In theater, you get to participate as an audience and or a performer, and it is a give and take living experience when you watch the play, and I hope you've gotten a sense of that during the class period this semester. Again, I've included a couple of links here for Angels in America. I will also send you a review sheet for the exam, your last exam. And if you have any questions for any of those things, again, please feel free to send me an email or let me know what questions you may have. It's been a pleasure. I hope to see you someday again, and thank you for participating in the class.